What is up, everybody, and welcome to the All-NBA Show, part of the All-City Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Matez. I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Tim Legler. Legs, I was hoping for a louder day in the NBA, more crazy moves or trades or something happening. We didn't get it, but there's still some things to talk about. Who got better, who got worse. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Getting ready for this holiday weekend, man. But and I was with you. I feel like now it's just like the trickle effect, Adam. It's like nothing big for the most part. It's just little additional signings to fill out rosters. We had some of that go on yesterday and this morning, but for the most part, no. The big stuff, the heavy stuff, has already happened. And I guess, as far as these teams go, Adam, a lot of what remains to be seen is let's take a look at some of these guys in Summer League, right? I mean, that could be something where you look at, because look, I'm going to be honest. I mean, there's a lack of familiarity with this draft, probably more than any draft I've covered. So I'm anxious to be out there and see these guys. And you never know. One of these guys might totally, convince you that, like, not that they're necessarily going to be a star or anything this year, but you might give you a little bit, hey, that's a nice pick for that team. Right. I remember first time I saw Tyler Hero in Vegas Summer League, that's kind of how I felt about him. I was like, wow, okay, he's got deep shooting range off the dribble that I did not know he had. And I thought, man, this guy's going to be a player. And, they ended up getting a really good player with that pick. So Well, that's what remains to be seen is that couple of weeks out in Vegas. I think maybe some guys to kind of open your eyes to an additional important piece that somebody may have picked up.
I still think there might be a trade as well. I mean, some major trades through the NBA. I mean, you still look at Brandon Ingram and wonder what's happening there. Lauri Markkanen, rumored to be, teams interested in him. Could he go somewhere? So I think that we'll still get some major news probably over this holiday weekend. So we'll have to wait and see. But we got a full slate today, Legs. So let's hop into it. We're going to be talking about some of these teams one at a time. And at the end, we'll just ask, did they get better? Did they get worse? Did they stay the same? And we're going to start with a big team, the Golden State Warriors. Very high-profile losses or guys out the door, Klay Thompson and Chris Paul. Some guys in, some underrated guys, though, coming in. De'Anthony Melton, Kyle Anderson, and then Lindy Waters. They're an interesting team because obviously you think of Klay Thompson. It's the end of an era in terms of the Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson trio that has been a staple there for a decade now. Best team of a generation. So that's out the window, but they weren't good last year. Whenever you have Steph, this is how I felt about the Warriors even last year. If you have Steph, there's always a chance things just fall into place. Like, he's so good that if the team finds their rhythm and their identity, then the ceiling just goes so high for them. But now that you lose Klay Thompson, what do you think of these guys? De'Anthony Melton missed a lot of games last year, but when he played, he was an impact player. Kyle Anderson's obviously a good, high IQ player. So what do you think of the roster as you see it right now?
All right. So, I mean, obviously losing Klay is the big story here. I don't know how much worse they're going to be.
Right.
Look, they were 10 games over 500. They were 46 and 36. We're not talking about, a 20-win team here. They were 10 games over 500. There's some things that are going to have to happen. I like the pieces they brought in. Kyle Anderson, one thing I know about that, they're not going to play faster. I can tell you that with Kyle Anderson in the mix. That's for sure. But he's a very good player. He's smart. He's a pretty good defensive player. He's going to do well in that system because he's really got a high IQ offensively. He's going to pick up the reads and the screening action and all of that very, very well. And then De'Anthony Melton's a really good player, man. Again, he guards. He played well for Philadelphia. Those are two nice little pickups. You lose Klay Thompson and Chris Paul, who really had no impact on them whatsoever. Klay Thompson, for me, I just wonder if it's more you're going to feel differently about them because Klay's not there anymore. And it's like the first step in breaking up that group, right? He's gone. Is that just going to now kind of demoralize everybody in terms of how they view the Warriors in general, when the truth of the matter is they might be able to replicate his production, and they get two pieces back that are going to be absolutely in the rotation, that are going to play a lot of minutes. And overall, are they that much worse off? If, Adam, two things have to happen. Kuminga has to take another step forward, which I don't think that's unrealistic to think that he can. He took a big one forward last year, ended up averaging 16 points a game, particularly the second half of the year, really, emerged. Is there another level for Jonathan Kuminga? Why wouldn't we think there could be with his age and athletic ability, and now even more responsibility offensively? So that has to happen. And then what's up with Andrew Wiggins? Do you think Andrew Wiggins can play the way that he did when they made their championship run? Or is what we saw last year pretty much what Andrew Wiggins is going to be the rest of his career? 13 points a game, 71 games, 27 minutes a game, 13 points.
What do you think? What's your gut? Because he had that 1 year. Honestly, they won the title that year. He seemed hyper motivated, locked in, unselfish, all those things. But since then, he has not seemed those things. And when I see a player, motivation is a hard thing to predict in a player. He's a guy that seems to be the gap between his most motivated years and least motivated years is really wide. So what does your gut tell you about him?
Here's the thing, though. I'm going to look, just looking at his time in Golden State. All right. He, in his 4 years prior to last year, 19.4, 18.6, 17.2, 17.1. So it's 4 years over 17, basically between 17 and 19. In all of those years, he took between almost 16 shots a game and then somewhere in the 14s for 3 straight years. He dropped down to 11 shots a game last year and averaged 13 points a game. I don't know. I wish I had an answer. He's only 29 years old. Like, he should not be past the point of like his prime scoring years. And so if Kuminga takes a step forward and Wiggins reverts, not even necessarily to how good he was when they won it, but just how good he's been in the regular season for them over the last 4 years prior to this year, if he does that plus the two pieces they added, I don't think necessarily the Warriors can be looked at as being worse. I think they could actually potentially be better than they were last year if those things happen. And I don't think anything I just said is crazy. I'm not saying Jonathan Kuminga has to be an all-star this year. He's got to average 24 points a game. That's unrealistic. I'm not saying that Wiggins has to get back to like 20 points a game like he was in Minnesota. That's probably unrealistic. I'm not saying that Kyle Anderson and DeAnthony Melton have to be anything more than they've been throughout their careers, which are really good role players. I don't think none of this stuff's crazy. I think if those just basic things happen, I think Golden State has a chance to actually be better in the way we view them than they were last year.
So what about, you said not saying anything crazy about Kuminga, but I know you're high on Kuminga. And to me, with Klay out of the mix, he moves up a spot in terms of importance, including on offense. Like, they need to now have him be a guy that is a factor night to night, maybe run some more plays to him, give him more touches. So you said without factoring that in, but I am factoring that in, that now Kuminga is on the clock. So what do you expect from him now?
So, all right, look, I think you might have a good point. He only played 26 minutes a game last year. That's not a lot of minutes. I mean, if you get him up to 32, 33 minutes, like normal starter minutes in the NBA, that's a significant jump. You're talking about a 25% increase in minutes. If that alone, and not having Klay, which I think Klay and his struggles at times became almost a distraction for the team a little bit, because we talked so much about Klay. What's wrong with Klay? How do you get Klay going? And was he coming off the bench? Was he going to start? Like, there was so much about that. That's removed from the equation now. To me, it's clearly now Jonathan Kuminga is their second best player. Yeah. Clearly. And that's the first time he has felt that way about himself. And I'm saying offensively, because some people might still say Draymond is their second best player, but I'm talking about just in terms of offensive production. He's their second best player. They're counting on him. So you might have a good point, Adam. 26 minutes a game. What if the guy plays 32, 33 minutes a game? Can he be a 20-point scorer in this league? Probably. Yeah. He averaged 16 a game this year. So I think there's a decent chance. And another thing is, those numbers last year are really skewed toward the second half of the year. So he didn't even have a great start. So let's see if he comes in out of camp and he feels different about himself when he walks through those doors, because he now is the second man on the totem pole offensively. And how that empowers a young player, how he carries himself, the confidence level he plays with, you might be right. Maybe there is a leap there where Jonathan Kuminga, averages 21 points a game this year on 32 points. If that's the case, Golden State's going to be, very competitive. And, we don't think that they're going to challenge for a title, but they're going to be competitive. Like, they're not going away because the Klay Thompson left town. That's not how I feel about them right now.
What about this one? He's a Lauri Markkanen. A lot of teams interested in him. Golden State's been rumored to have interest. I don't know what it would take to get it done. Obviously, that's a great player, so it's going to take a lot. The market has been set for great players in terms of how many draft picks it costs. But what would you just think about the fit of a Steph Curry, Lauri Markkanen duo? Is that something that you feel can give a new era, new life to the Steph Curry Warriors?
Very few teams in this league you could mention, and I would say Lauri Markkanen's not a great fit. I really think he's a super talented player, 7-footer that can shoot the ball like that, runs well. He's a tough defensive rebounder. So he's tougher than probably you would think for a 7-footer that shoots a lot of perimeter jumpers. That would be phenomenal. I don't know what it would take to get Lauri Markkanen, but he would fit in that system, perfectly well. I don't know if it would just be picks. Would it be, Podziemski, Kuminga, like would they be looking there? Because Markkanen, how old is Markkanen? Markkanen's pretty young, right? I mean, he's right, just starting. I always say prime years are 25 to 32. I don't know how old he is. I don't have it in front of me, but he's in there at the beginning of those years. So I think that would be a phenomenal pickup. I just don't know what all they'd have to give up to get him. But if you go Curry and Markkanen, and, it cost you one of your young guys and some picks, but you hold on to one of those other two young guys I mentioned, and you still have Wiggins. It's a pretty interesting team.
They've got all their draft picks, so they could put together a nice package. They do have some young players that you could also include. Utah is one of those teams we talked about yesterday, might be looking at the landscape in the West saying, okay, we're not good enough right now. That's the draft piece, and you can really have a nice war chest of picks in the future to start completely over if you're Utah. So I don't know. That's an interesting one. I would keep an eye on it. Golden State is an interesting year. The Klay Thompson era ending obviously feels weird, but it does in some ways give it the opportunity to Steph Curry to have, even more of a spotlight here and see if there's an act 3, as it were, with that Warriors team. Let's move on now to Atlanta. This is a team in full-on rebuild mode. So they lose DeJounte Murray. They also lose A.J. Griffin, but they add Dyson Daniels, who I like. Point guard, really good defensive point guard. On-ball defense is incredible. Larry Nance Jr., a little veteran presence. And then Zachariah Risa-Shea is their big pick, the number 1 pick overall. They also added Nikola Jurcic. So now you look at this and say, they're clearly in teardown mode. You still have Trae Young. I suspect he's a guy that could be involved in trade talks this summer, or if not this summer, during the season. But they're starting the rebuild around Risa-Shea, Jalen Johnson. Like, they've got some young players, and it looks like they have, some picks as well. Is this the foundation of a good rebuild for you? Risa-Shea, Jalen Johnson, and the picks? Or is this a team you look at that still, as Atlanta has been for the last couple of years, in that middle ground?
I think this is going to completely depend after seeing Risa-Shea a couple of months, right? I mean,
yeah, such a mystery.
We pretty much knew what Wembanyama was, and we were still kind of blown away what he looked like after like 3 months, how much better he was than he was at the beginning of the year, how quickly that happened. I know I'm not comparing him to Wembanyama, but he was the number 1 pick in the draft. He's a big guy. So for me, when you even want to think about what potentially their future looks like and the rebuild and some of these additions, it's going to center around him. That's the number 1 pick in the draft. If they got that right, and it turns out he's the best of this crop, and we're not going to know that for a little while, then I think, okay, they might be in decent shape here finally, like going forward. But that, to me, the rest of that was on that screen doesn't do a whole lot for me. It's about Risa-Shea, Jalen Johnson. Like, those are the guys that I'm looking at now that have got to be the real deal. And I feel pretty good that Jalen Johnson could turn into that. You and I talked about him at the end of the season last year and how much we liked him. And now you add Risa-Shea to the mix. I don't know enough about him. I got to see him. I get a sample size of him against NBA competition before I can really determine what Atlanta's going to be.
Yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to. He, to me, is a guy, he kind of reminds me almost of Bargnani, not stylistically, but just in terms of what is the guy's upside? Is he really a star? Sometimes you have a tough first pick, and it's a guy that's good, but not a cornerstone piece, and you have to build around him or at least give him a chance. They do have, the one thing I'll say about Atlanta that I like is they have a lot of players that I think a lot of teams will want, including Bogdan Bogdanovic, who I think they can fetch something for. So their rebuild is maybe only half begun. if they continue to tear it down and get some more assets. And probably how you feel about the Hawks is how you feel about whatever it is they get for these final assets, including Trae Young, by the way. Is that a positive asset that you're getting a lot of stuff for? Do you find a team that's vulnerable enough to kind of, break the bank? We'll find out how that plays out. I'm not sure if I really love them, to be honest. If I were predicting Atlanta is going to be great.
Atlanta next year, and my prediction is we're gonna have to talk about them in the first 2 weeks of the season because we're not going to do much more after that. Unless we do what we did with the Spurs, right? Which was we talked about the Spurs a lot in the beginning of the season, and then realized you didn't really need to. But we did every probably 3 weeks we did a Wemby watch,
right?
And maybe we'll do the same thing with Risa Shea. That's kind of going to be
way.
That's what the season's going to hinge on.
I agree with you. I think it's going to go like this. First month of the season, we'll get it. We'll talk about him. Risa Shea check-in. I think, again, they'll be just a player at the trade deadline and in season. And that's when, like I said, they have some interesting players. So we'll talk about it. A team I really want to talk about, though, and we'll have to do it on the other side, is the New Orleans Pelicans, because they are a team that I think made a very interesting move with DeJounte Murray, but they're also a team that I think has another move in them with Brandon Ingram. So I think let's take our first break. On the other side, we'll get into New Orleans and what they're going to do, as well as Cleveland, Phoenix, Indiana, the Clippers, all of those in segment 2, right here on the other side. First, let me tell you guys about Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search. Match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. We do this all the time at ALLCITY, trying to hire new people, producers, staff, sales teams, everything else. You could sort through a million different applications. Most of those people unqualified, most of them not even interested in the job, but Indeed helps you match faster. 93% of employees agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. And listeners of the show will get $75 sponsored job credit to get your job more visibility at Indeed.com/AllCity. Just go to Indeed.com/AllCity right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this very podcast. Say, Tim Legler and Adam Mata sent you. Indeed.com/AllCity. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Also want to tell you guys about Manscaped. Fellas, do you want your grooming routine to be one and done deal? Well, the days of using the same trimmer for your face and your private parts are over, thanks to our friends at Manscaped. They've come up with the ultimate package to keep your hairs trimmed from 12 to 6. Introducing the Beard and Balls Bundle, feature Lawnmower 5.0 and the Beard Hedger, a trimmer for the moneymaker and another for the boys downstairs. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code ALLNBA at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code ALLNBA at manscaped.com. For the premium grooming experience, trust Manscaped. All right, let's get back to this here. The New Orleans Pelicans are a team I really am curious about your thoughts on. They add DeJounte Murray, who I'm curious what you think of overall. They lost Dyson Daniels, Najee Marshall, Larry Nance Jr., and Jonas Valanciunas. I think they have one more move in them, whether that's a move to get off of Ingram and try to get another star player or a package of players. But whatever they do, I think they need to add a center. They've been rumored to be interested in Wendell Carter, Daniel Tice, maybe even a big move like Jared Allen. So DeJounte Murray, what are your thoughts on what he brings to the Pelicans?
I like DeJounte Murray a lot. I mean, I think right now, he's got to almost kind of reemerge as a difference maker because, it just wasn't a good year in Atlanta. I don't think there was great chemistry with he and Trae Young. It didn't work. It didn't have the impact you thought. I liked him a lot leaving San Antonio to go there. Right now, he's got to get in a better situation where you're winning more games. Let's recap, first of all, their season. 49 wins. Zion had his healthiest year, 70 games, and played a little bit differently. Yeah, played differently than he had a little bit in the past. Had the ball a little bit more, facilitated more, wasn't the high usage shot taker necessarily. They, of course, had that 40-point game in the 7-8 play-in game against the Lakers. And then he got hurt at the end of that game, and they didn't see him in the postseason when they got swept by Oklahoma City. And in that series, CJ McCollum didn't play well. Ingram didn't play well coming back from the injury and just was not very good. They were no match for OKC, and that's how their season ended. So here we go. You add DeJounte Murray. You still have those other guys, and the question is Brandon Ingram going to move? Are you better off moving Ingram at this point or holding on to him? I think it's weird because there's a lot of mixed reaction out there, Adam, about Brandon Ingram. Because I've been hard on Brandon Ingram, and when he signed that extension, or no, I'm sorry, when that was coming up, like, would you give Brandon Ingram 4 years, $208 million? And I said, absolutely not. Would I consider giving, you got to be fiscally, I think, irresponsible to do something like that to your organization. But he had a lot of defenders out there when I said that. And I was surprised by that. I really was.
Me too.
And as I sit here now and just looking at the market, his name came up in Philly. A couple other places, his name surfaced. Like, is this the difference maker? Is this the missing piece? And I don't know, man. I just don't feel that way about him right now. I would not be surprised whatsoever if they figure out a way to move on from Brandon Ingram. And I don't know, like, without seeing DeJounte Murray fit alongside CJ McCollum and Zion, it's hard for me to know, is that a step back or step forward if you move him? And it also depends on what you get back for him. I don't think his market value is very high right now, Adam. So I don't know what you're going to get. I don't know what you're going to get for him that's going to really be a massive difference maker in the now, which I think is important. CJ McCollum is I think past his prime. You never know with Zion in terms of health and when he's going to be available. So I feel like the window's kind of like now. I don't think you're talking about getting future picks and all that for a guy like Brandon Ingram. I think you need a player that can come in and play, or multiple guys that are rotational guys. So New Orleans is an interesting team because their year wasn't a disaster. It just ended really badly. And sometimes that gives you a really bad taste as you go into the summer.
I'm curious what the chat thinks as you're talking, because you surprised me to say that there are fans of his out there that, because to me, I think this is a no-brainer that they have to move on. To me, I'm such a believer, Legs, in players and teams expire. There's a moment when it's like, you know what, we gave it enough time and there's nothing left to be gained. Even if there's reason to believe logically that there's more there, though. There's more there. At a certain time, you get there and say, it didn't happen now. You got to get off before the vibes get too low and the team just stops to believe in each other and to believe in themselves. And to me, that time is now for Brandon Ingram. You're making this move with DeJounte Murray, who, by the way, has not been the least volatile player to bring into a locker room. It's not that he's a problem, but it's just you're bringing him into an environment where already it's like, what's the identity? What's the, how does this work? To me, it's a great time to move on. And then on top of that, you need a center. You need just a differently designed team. They've got Trey Murphy. They've got Herb Jones. They've got guys that I love that can fill in those spots more as role players than the stars, but at a high level. Zion showed in the play-in and really down the stretch of the season last year how great he can be when he's locked in, motivated, and in shape. I think you're better off betting on him to bring that energy into the next season and to move on from Brandon Ingram. And that's why, to me, this one's a no-brainer. I would be so shocked if they thought they could just run it back as they were. You talked about Najee Marshall. He's another piece they lost, though.
Yeah.
He was a depth piece. This was one of the things about them. Dyson Daniels, Najee Marshall, part of what I loved about that team is they had the depth. You lose Dyson Daniels, replace him with DeJounte Murray, so that's a 1-for-1. Najee Marshall, though, is a guy, I don't know, is that a big loss for them? What do you make of that one?
I like Najee Marshall a lot. It's all context. I look at that as a great addition for Dallas. I don't know that I view it as a big a loss for New Orleans because they've got some other guys in those spots, right, that play those minutes. It kind of fits what Dallas needed, man. They need to get a little bit tougher, stronger, and a bigger, stronger wing defender, I think, than Derrick Jones Jr. was. I think that's what Najee Marshall is going to give them some. Am I mistaken, or did Valanciunas? He left, right? He went to Detroit.
He's out. He's out as well. Yeah, he's out.
Yeah. So who's their center?
That's what I'm saying. They don't have one. They need a center now. And they're rumored to be interested in Daniel Tice, Wendell Carter, maybe even Jared Allen. That'd be more of a trade scenario. But, they need one. And I think that's part of, like, when you think about this Pelicans roster, how do they win a championship? You got Zion. How do you win a championship? The center part to me is the hardest part because Zion, as good as he is, you need to have somebody, in my opinion, that both protects the rim but also opens up the paint. That's a hard thing to find, especially as a role player. But to me, the entire roster, it's hard to say, is DeJounte Murray going to be there? Well, who's the center? Because that's where you start to understand this roster.
No, very true. I'm thinking around the league, who's got a glut, right? Who's got a surplus of centers that they might be interested in obtaining. Pacers had 3 of them. Jalen Smith left. So they've got 2 now with Turner and Isaiah Jackson. So that could have been a place potentially, and that would have been a nice fit, I think, for Indiana. That pace, that style might have been good for Brandon Ingram. I don't know. Adam. It's hard to know what's going to happen with him. There's no doubt that they're going to be exploring it. I just don't think there's a great market for him. Not like there was a few years ago. I think the end of the season, regardless of whether it was an injury he was coming back from or not, he did not play well when he needed to play well for his team in that series. And he had another episode where he just didn't look like he was necessarily mentally where he needed to be when he was not playing. He was taken out of the game and they made a big run, kind of sat there and looked mopey. Like, it's just a bad look, bad end of the season. And now you're going to say, hey, who wants him? What are you willing to give me for him? And I think it's more of a buyer's market for other teams when you look at Brandon Ingram. So let's see what happens here over the next couple of weeks.
And it should be noted that this offseason, the one position that has really surprised me in terms of what guys were getting paid was the center position. A lot of centers. I mean, Isaiah Hartenstein, I love the guy. $87 million is more than I would have expected he was going to go for. So this was a bad summer to be in the hunt for a center. It was a bad summer for that. And maybe they just end up trying to pick up somebody like Tice for 1 year and just roll it over and make that decision a little bit later. The last guy I have here, Legs, for you, a guy that's going to be on my guys list this year is Jordan Hawkins. I really love Jordan Hawkins, and I'm curious to see if he fits into a spot. Beautiful shot, tons of confidence. He's undersized, but I think he's a guy that's just a scorer, a shooter and a scorer. And either via trade, because again, if you have an Ingram and you have to get a deal done, Hawkins would be an interesting guy to throw in or to receive if you're on the receiving end of that trade. Or is he a guy that now in a second year, he's part of the plan? He's a guy that's going to be very interesting to me, and I'm just curious if you have a take on him.
No, I love Jordan Hawkins. No doubt. He's legit. He's the real deal. He's got tremendous upside. I think he's only scratched the surface of what he can be. And he had flashes last year where he could string together baskets. He gets really hot and he could, fill it up for brief periods of time. He was not, I don't think, involved enough throughout the entire season as he should have been. He takes a step forward now, I believe, this year. So yeah, I think that's a good one. Jordan Hawkins. So you put him next to you. Who else you got? You got your Hartenstein. Who else is on your guys list?
Quentin Grimes. I got to save it. We'll give this in season 2 right before it begins, right. But I'll have my list. Trust me, man.
All right. Got it.
Let's go on to Cleveland now. Not a ton of change here, but the big change is Kenny Atkinson. I mean, it's almost a funny graphic to make, but Cleveland had a good year last year. You look at them, and I think it's part of why Donovan Mitchell re-ups. It's part of why I think there's a good feeling around Cleveland that they're moving in the right direction. How much does a new coach change? And what do you know and think of Kenny Atkinson now that he's at the helm?
I like Kenny Atkinson a lot. Known him a long time. I think that he's a really laid back dude.
Really? He seems really intense to me.
Really laid back in terms of kind of in-game management. Okay. Different than I think maybe, and I'm not saying that JB Bickerstaff necessarily was super fiery, but I thought he probably has a little bit more of that than Kenny Atkinson does. Maybe this isn't a team that necessarily needs that. I'm curious to see how he is able to max out what some of their younger guys can be offensively. That to me is a big challenge for Kenny Atkinson. How do I get more out of Evan Mobley? Like that to me is a crux of what you have to do to get that job. When you're sitting down for that interview, you've got to talk about that. How much more is there? And because he's got to tantalizes you with his length and his just overall ability. But I feel like there are times when he just gets kind of lost in the weeds out there. You don't notice him as much. What's Kenny Atkinson's plan for that? I think that's a big part of what he's going to bring to the table. He's really, really smart, and he's been around winning situations. Yeah. He's networked with the right guys in this league. So the IQ is there. The pedigree is there. He's been in winning cultures. So there's no doubt that's going to be a factor. It comes down to what are you doing to squeeze these lemons to get a little bit more juice out of what you have offensively. That to me is what he would have been selling himself on when he would sat down for that interview.
What do you think of coaches going to their second? Because he had a 4-year stint basically with Brooklyn. Went and coached at a couple different places under as an assistant under a couple different coaches, Tyronn Lue and Steve Kerr, very good coaches to be under. And now he comes back to his second stint. So I always think that there's a lot of coaches, Michael Malone's one of them, who was much better the second time around. It's almost like you have to fail the first time and then come back the second time. So how do you think that'll impact him, this being his second gig?
Yeah, listen, you learn a lot from that situation. He's lucky, man. A lot of these guys only get one crack.
Yep.
He's getting a second opportunity at this, and his name's come up for other jobs that I feel like he could have gotten a
Yep.
couple and turned down. So he's respected, really highly around the league. But it does give you a little bit different perspective, and I'm sure you go and you learn from some of the things you did in your last stop that you're going to change and do differently. It's a totally different set of guys, different locker room, different integrity, every group. So I think he's going to be more comfortable this time around, and I think he's going to learn from past mistakes. And look, he's got a good team. I mean, this is a team that went to the second round of the playoffs. Like that's a good run most years for teams. I don't think they were a championship caliber team. I don't think anybody looked at them that way, but they won a 7-game series and then they got into the second round. They ran into the best team in the NBA. So he's got a good team to work with. He's got phenomenal guard talent. He's got some nice bigs. He's got a lot to work with. I think, a lot of utensils here in his kitchen that he can go to. So we're gonna see, man, what his impact is. I love JB Bickerstaff a lot. Like, I don't know that he necessarily got treated fairly here, but a lot of it I think had to do with Donovan Mitchell. So let's see if Kenny Atkinson can foster that relationship pretty quickly.
They're like New Orleans of the East to me, in that I feel like they're one trade away from me being able to take them seriously. And I think that trade is probably going to have to come in season. And might be, like, by the way, with each other, right? We just talked about Jared Allen. New Orleans has said they have interest there. So maybe an Ingram, Jared Allen, and pick swap. I don't know, something there. But they're a team to me that I think is going to be good. Kenny Atkinson could be interesting. But for me to say they're going to go into that top tier in the East, it would take one more move from them. Now a team that's interesting, Phoenix Suns, super underwhelming year last year, but they make some moves. Monte Morris, point guard, Mason Plumlee, a center, Ryan Dunn, who they picked up in the draft, a couple other pieces. They lose Eric Gordon and Drew Eubanks, which is, meaningful, but not enormous losses. So they were underwhelming last year. And then there's the turmoil about Kevin Durant. Teams are interested? Is he available? And all of this different stuff. So with the moves that they have made so far, what do you make of Phoenix? Are they meaningfully better?
There's also another big one there that we left out, which is Mike Budenholzer.
That's right, the coach as well. Yeah,
so that's kind of a big one too. And I think that was part of the problem. I like Frank Vogel. I think Frank Vogel is really smart. I don't think Frank Vogel really ever garnered the respect of the players he had to. I just don't. I didn't feel that way when I watched them. Mike Budenholzer has got a little bit different personality. Type 1, he's won a championship in this league. Frank Vogel had 2. Mike Budenholzer is a championship coach, and he was also an excellent coach in Atlanta too. Team that won 60 games in Atlanta, had 4 guys make the All-Star team in 1 year. Mike Budenholzer can really coach, and he's got a little bit more fire in the belly, man. I think they're going to respect him. I think they're going to look forward to playing for him. He's a really good offensive coach. I think he's going to maybe be able to utilize their roster a little bit better. I don't love the fact that, I don't know that they're going into the year once again, without a point guard that can help these guys sort of facilitate and set the table. I like some of those additions, though. Ryan Dunn is a guy that, man, they're going to like him a lot there if he gets playing time. Like, he can flat out guard anybody. Crazy athlete on the wing. They needed to improve their athleticism on the wing defensively. They absolutely did that. The other names on that list, Monte Morris, that doesn't do much for me. Colin Gillespie. What was the other? I'm missing. Oh, Plumlee. I like Plumlee. I like that addition too. I think that's a nice pickup. He's a high energy guy. He runs the floor really well. So I think they're going to be better. Phoenix, look, it's been a rough road everywhere Kevin Durant's really been. There's been an underachievement on these teams. I feel probably better about this team going into the year than I did last year. And now it comes down to what Mike Budenholzer can do differently to get more out of this group and make them more cohesive. And then, obviously stay healthy. Let these guys play together and get some continuity. They didn't get a ton of that last year.
Monte Morris to me is actually interesting. He does move the needle for me. Now, he's undersized, so when you talk about playoffs and how do you put the rosters out there, that could be a question, because he could break their defense, which was already very fragile. He could be a guy that hurts that a lot. But he's a phenomenal catch-and-shoot three-point shooter. And when you talk about the way they play, they're going to draw double teams. They're going to overload you. The question is, can they put lineups out there with shooters at all spots, or at least enough shooters that those rotations are tough? And he's a guy that's a good point guard. He's going to get the ball where it needs to go and then get out of the way when he needs to get out of the way. And he's going to knock down catch and shoot threes. So Monte Morris could end up playing an actual role for them. Colin Gillespie similar, but he's a two-way player and he's really tiny. So I don't know about him, unproven. But Monte Morris, I would not be surprised if that move actually ends up making a difference. Indiana's another interesting one because they added James Wiseman, former number 1 overall pick. They also got some draft picks late, mostly second round guys. But Wiseman piece of this is the part I want to ask. I had given up on Wiseman, I think 2 years ago, Legs, but here he is getting another shot. It's a different roster than what he has been on previously. Is there any hope that this could be his stop, that there's something there, or are you like me and just don't think there's a player there?
I think we would have known if there was by now. It's been, he's not as green as you think. He's been around a little bit, man. And this was a guy that I guess foolishly or falsely put a lot of faith in when he was in Golden State, that he was going to be part of that wave of youth to combine with the veterans to kind of keep that thing going after he won the championship. I thought, but he was gone by then. I thought he was going to be there. Moses Moody, Kuminga. We talked about those 3 guys a lot. And you look up, I don't know that Moody's taken the leap forward. Wiseman wasn't there much at all. And Kuminga clearly has taken that leap. So that was a big part of that, the disappointment there. And, look, you go to a team that's got higher expectations. There's more accountability. There's more attention to detail. Like, that's what Indiana to me is going into this year after the season they had. And you've got some guys there, I think, that are pros that can get the most out of him. But I can't imagine him being anything more than a lower minute level rotational player, if that. I don't know that he has a big impact for them. I hope I am wrong. And I hope, 25 games into the season, Adam, we're doing a 20-minute segment on James Wiseman's impact on the Indiana Pacers. I hope that's the case because the talent looked like it was there coming out, but it just has not materialized. And I think there's a reason for that. I think there's just something missing in here, like that is preventing that from happening for him. This is a very healthy situation he's going to. Doesn't happen here, it's probably not gonna.
I think it's at the end of the road. I'll tell you this. I don't think Rick Carlisle is going to have the patience for a guy like this. That to me seems like oil and water. So kind of a surprising move, to be honest. The Clippers, very fascinating offseason. They lose Paul George and they lose Mason Plumlee, but they add Miles Bridges, Nick Batum, Chris Dunn, Derek Jones Jr., Kevin Porter Jr., Mo Bamba. So this is an interesting one. Paul George was the third wheel there. Kawhi Leonard's team, James Harden is the system player. Paul George kind of fit in around him. That team had a long run with it, didn't work out, but they add a bunch of guys, obviously with questionable backgrounds in Kevin Porter and Miles Bridges, but they're good players. Nick Batum's a good player. Chris Dunn I think is a great, take a stab on him. They're likely losing Westbrook, and then Derek Jones Jr. made an impact last year. So they got a lot of players that I think could be rotation guys. What do you think of them? Is it over for them? Do they have hope? Is this a new era?
Yeah, that's a lot of dudes, and that's a lot of years in the league. And it just, some of these other teams we've put up, the additions, there's a couple names on every one of those graphics we put up where you're just like, okay, young guy not going to play.
Right.
That list you just put up for the Clippers, it's like all of those guys have played where they've been. They're all expecting to play. It could look like a totally new team with the exception of like Harden and Kawhi. If, assuming Kawhi comes back and plays. I mean, I will say this. It's at the point you have to completely suspend reality to think that Kawhi Leonard's going to have a healthy year and be available for them in the playoffs. Like, right? I mean, there's just no way I could expect that to happen. So if that's the case, what are they? Is it going to be the James Harden dominated offense? I don't think James Harden's that player anymore either. So these are some interesting guys. Bridges probably at the top of the list because that's a very talented player, very talented. And so let's see, and he gets almost like a new lease on life going out there to see, does he, have a huge year for them? If that's the case, hey, you make up for a lot of what you're losing with Paul George. That remains to be seen, man. When you see a team with that many guys coming in that are all vets, that are all expecting to play, I got to see what that looks like. I'm sorry. I don't know what that's about to look like.
All right, Legs, let's go to our final segment here. And let's put on our rose-colored glasses and explain to the people why the future is bright for a few teams, not for everybody, but for these upcoming teams. This is brought to you by Shady Rays. Head to shadyrays.com and use code AC35. You get 35% off of polarized sunglasses at checkout. Again, AC35 is that code at shadyrays.com. So we're going to look at now and say, let's give an updated top 4 in the Eastern Conference. We'll do the same for the West here in a minute, but we'll do the top 4 in the East and one wild card team. But let's start with the top 4, and I'm curious if we have the same. I think number 1's pretty easy, to be honest with you, Lake.
Boston Celtics. Do you want to just do one at a time, or you want to go through all 4?
Do one at a time here real quick. They signed, by the way, they're a team that said second apron, who cares? We're signing everybody to super maxes. But inflate the books. We got our team for the next however long.
It's incredible. There was a graphic put up. I was doing Sports Center the other day. We did back-to-back graphics. One was on Tatum, and then one was on the Sixers and the contracts that were signed. And between those 4 players that were on the screen, it was $1 billion, over $1 billion of salary. Right? I mean, I'm just saying, and all I could think about was, I just wish my parents met 25 years later.
I know, yeah.
That would have been a really nice thing, you know? But look, what can you say, man? Best team in the NBA, most versatile team in the NBA. And they go out and Tatum gets the richest contract in the history of the league. Good timing for that for him. Jaylen Brown took a huge step forward for this team last year. That's going to continue. You didn't even have a fully healthy Porzingis at the end of the year, and you still were able to get this thing done. So, yeah, clearly to me, Boston is the measuring stick for not just the East, but the league right now.
Yeah. So I have them number 1 as well. But number 2, I think we'll have the same number 2 team, but I don't know. Who do you got?
My goodness. I think I'm going to go with the New York Knicks number 2.
2 for 2.
Okay. It was tied. It's a toss-up, and I'll go tell you now who my 3 is, because I think it was a coin flip between them and Philly. That's my 2-3 in the Eastern Conference, and I'm going to give the edge to New York because I just think they're a little tougher, and there's some things have to be proven in Philadelphia. One, it just got to prove that this all works. High usage ball handler, scorer type guy. How does that affect Maxey? Embiid, is probably going to miss 15, 20 games, throughout the year. Is Paul George a nice insurance policy for that when he's out, so they don't drop as much as they did in the standings? Let's see. And then right now they don't really have an idea what the rest of their rotation looks like. They've still got to fill out their team. Yeah,
right.
But that's a lot of talent, man. That's a lot of talent. You got the guard, the wing, and the big. So that to me puts Philly right there in the mix. I think, like I said, it's a coin toss. At the end of the day, by a nose, I put the Knicks second over Philly.
Well, you just had the understatement of the century. You might as well said LeBron's a little bit athletic. Steph Curry's a little bit of a shooter. You said the Knicks are a little bit tougher than Philly. I think the Knicks are the number 1 toughest team in the NBA. I mean, that's the one thing you're going to say about them. And they got their guy, in Mikal Bridges to complete the Nova Knicks. I just think that's a team that what you're getting from them from a toughness standpoint. You got to beat them. They're not going to beat themselves. They're not going to die easily. They're just going to be coming at you in waves. Philly, it's the big question. And you add a guy in Paul George. Doesn't have the reputation of being a guy that gets bigger when the pressure cooker, gets hotter. So to me, that's why this one, I agree with you on a talent standpoint. These teams are easy or close, but I look at this and I go, the Knicks to me were an easy call above Philly for that very reason. And because, like you said, they've proven it. We still got to see what that Philly team looks like with those 3 guys. But here's where it's interesting. Those 3 to me are 1, 2, 3. And if you disagree on the order, so be it. But number 4, I think you could go a handful of different ways. So where did you go?
I think you can go with one of 4 different teams. And the one of that group that I'm picking is the Indiana Pacers.
Woo! We do differ. All right.
I'm going with Indiana number 4. I think I know who you're going to pick. I got a feeling.
Okay.
And let me see if I got it. Get a hint. Was it a team that added a guy that your favorite team lost?
No. I wanted to,
okay.
but I'm not bold enough.
Well, then there's 2 other teams then that I'm thinking, and we'll let you say yours in a minute. I'm going with the Pacers. I think what they did last year worked and fit. They weren't completely healthy at the end of the year either. I love the number they re-signed Obi Toppin at. That was a really good signing and a bargain, I thought, for the way he played the postseason. Pascal Siakam was sensational from the beginning, but I think, in year 2 of playing with this group, I think it's just going to get better and better for them. I thought they had a pretty good draft too. So I don't know. I just have faith in the way they play stylistically. I'm a believer. So I'm going with the Indiana Pacers 4.
I think it's obviously a solid pick. I agree with you, by the way, that there are 4 teams: Cleveland, Indiana, Orlando, Milwaukee. I went with Milwaukee on this one. And look, I don't, part of this was something similar is happening in Denver right now. Milwaukee won a title. They've had lesser teams since then by small margins. But you know what else they've had? 50-win seasons. They're a team that when you have Giannis, your floor is really, really high. And I just look at them and I say, they have guys that could take a step up. They have some question marks. They're another team that I think is not done. Like we should expect big news with them here in the coming days, maybe weeks. So they're a team that I think is still incomplete, but you got Giannis. And when you have Giannis, your floor is just so high. And I think that it's probably enough to be higher than these teams that I think are on the doorstep and could make that leap. But I don't have them yet. What about a wild card? Oh, go ahead.
Real quick, just because I didn't talk about them, and I guess why I feel I'm not as high on them is because I would actually go Indiana 4, Orlando 5. I might go Cleveland 6, Milwaukee 7.
Man,
they feels stale to me.
Yeah, it definitely does. It definitely does.
They haven't. It's just what's fresh about it. I know they still have Giannis. We all love Giannis. We know how hard he competes, how hard he plays. I don't think necessarily that he and Lillard really ever found that unstoppable, duo flow. I don't think they found it last year. And Lillard was dealing with all kinds of stuff off the court. I don't know if that's going to be different and better for him mentally. Will he be in a better place? They've done nothing to their supporting cast at all. And it feels like they needed to. So for me, and look, we didn't see the returns or the results for this team defensively that we thought we would really with Doc Rivers. So I just think there's no change that was, to me, an infusion of adrenaline and excitement that they brought in. A lot of these other teams did, and I don't feel they did. Whether it was a coaching change for some teams or a draft pick or a free agent, whatever. What did they do? They kind of stood pat on a year that was disappointing.
Well, last year was Last year was the big move, and I do think there's something to it's really hard for a coach to come in midseason and make an immediate impact. Sometimes you get the emotional boost, but to say, okay, we've really put our fingerprints all over this team, I'm counting on Doc Rivers with an offseason and a training camp for things to be a little bit more settled. And then you mentioned it. One of the big stories last year was there was a lot of turmoil in the life of Damian Lillard, not just the trade, but some other stuff. And I think this year he's going to be a little healthier, a little more spry even than he was last year. And I think the chemistry improves. And if not, guess what? You can make some trades and maybe get back into it. But I'm counting on the floor for a player of Giannis in his absolute apex prime to be high enough to be top 4 in his conference, which kind of hints at how I feel about the Western Conference. Oh, first, one thing. Do you have a dark horse team, a team that could surprise everybody? You just mentioned the top, 7 teams, I think. So let's rule them out. Is there a team in the East that you're like, you know what, though? They could be better than people think.
If I had to pick one of those teams, which I don't want to, I'd probably say Atlanta.
Okay.
Because I think there could be a formula there, depending what happens to Trae Young, but there could be a formula there now where you have more of an identity offensively and how you build around that team. And again, if Reese Shea's the real deal, that could be a dark horse, man. He's the number 1 pick in the draft. Jalen Johnson takes a huge leap forward. That's a lot of talent that's emerging for you that can change your prospects. So they were 36-46 a year ago, 10 seed. I don't know if they'll be better than that or not, but those younger talents that they have make them, to me, an intriguing team to keep an eye on. And they got rid of DeJounte Murray, and let's see if now that they can build this thing in a different way offensively and what that looks like. The number 1 pick in the draft has a tendency to make you kind of wait and see on them, and that's why I think Atlanta might be interesting.
I'm going to say no. I'm the one that made this segment and said we have to pick a dark horse. And I just don't think there is one. Like, I could try to talk myself into Charlotte or something with a new coach, and maybe some of these guys, Brandon Miller makes a leap or this or that. But to be honest with you, all of those teams, to me, I think a team is going to be bummed to get the 8 seed next year because they're going to be looking at that lottery and thinking, dang it, man, well, we won 37 games and we're in the playoffs somehow. So I think the bottom of the East is really scary. Orlando, Indiana, Cleveland, that rounds out those top 4 we talked about. And after that, who knows? All right, the West is interesting, though. My take, Legs, to set you up, is I think there's a clear number 1 now in the West. Not a clear they're going to win it, but just a clear team that I think you look at and say the least disaster potential while having the same ceiling.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think they're going to be the number 1 seed in the West. Again, it's the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yep.
I think those 2 additions, man, that they made, Caruso and Hartenstein,
Perfect.
You can't overstate what that does with your toughness. We talked about the Knicks' toughness. Like, those 2 guys are tough guys, and they do a whole lot of stuff that just equates to winning. That's not related to production. It's just about winning. And they needed obviously size. They answered that with Hartenstein. Caruso's a guy that is he just sets the tone for you defensively with the number of things he does on the court to disrupt. So I think Oklahoma City, they were a 1 seed last year. I think they're built to continue to keep their foot on the gas because of how young they are. Like, some of these teams in the past, we've seen it. Like, they get a high seed and then they flame out in the playoffs. The following regular season, they're not that concerned about their seeding. They're managing things differently. I think this is a team that's going to come out full throttle because of their age. They're going to be still trying to prove something to themselves every night. So I'm not going to be surprised one bit if Oklahoma City is around 60 wins or north of that next year and gets the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. Again, I agree with you. Depending on the matchup at the time, like this year, I didn't think they could beat Dallas, and they didn't. Like, it depends who they play in the playoffs. I'm not sure.
I agree.
I think they're going to win the whole thing, but we're talking about something different here. Just talking about the regular season and the way this roster looks and what they're playing for and the purpose with which they're playing every night. It lends itself to think Oklahoma City could be number 1 seed.
I just have so much confidence. And it's funny, I know Thunder fans were upset with me last year when I had a lot of questions about them, and I think rightfully so as it played out. But now you go to this next year, and I think they've answered a lot of those. Chet Holmgren now goes into his 2nd season. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, all the guys, Jalen Williams, I think, needed the playoffs last year to kind of learn what he had to learn last year. And I just look at them now and I go, that's a team that's going to win. If I were to guess right now, I think that they have a great chance at 60 wins. And 60 wins is going to be hard in the West. There's too many good teams. But they got 57 last year and they got better. So I think that's it. If I had there's 2 questions about him. And one is, Hartenstein does change the way they're going to play. Whether he starts or comes off the bench, that's a dynamic that you haven't seen a whole lot of. Chet and him together, it's a little bit bigger and more traditional. Is there any hiccups with that? Does it change them in meaningful ways for the worse? That's something they might struggle with before they figure it out. And then number 2, and I don't know how big of a deal this is, Legs. You're going to laugh. I already know you're going to laugh at me for saying this. They had a lot of guys play 82 games last year, or 80 games. Yeah. And now you have Lou Dort and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander going into an Olympic summer after having a fairly deep playoff run, and then they go back. They're young enough that they can absorb that. But I do wonder, if you talk about you come into training camp with new pieces, you have to figure that out, and you didn't really have an offseason. I could see them struggling out the gate and maybe just like a little fatigue as the season begins, and that could impact their season. Those are the 2 questions I have.
Why would I laugh at that? I think that's perfectly rational thinking,
Well, you don't like when I say back-to-backs. Sometimes I say guys are a little tired.
That's not a soft Adam Pillow take. That's not that. It's not a beanbag chair Adam take. It's that was okay. I think that's a logical, rational, well thought out take on what their summer is going to look like. Now they do have super young, fresh legs, man. So I don't know. I don't know what the carryover will be from a different summer for some of those guys. I'm not too worried about that. I think some of these other teams with some of the vets they have are going to treat the regular season a little differently. And Oklahoma City is going to be that one team that just they're going to be steady as she goes all year.
Yeah. All right. Now it gets interesting though, because who's number 2? I think we definitely have a different answer here. I would guess, and I think you could have 3 or 4 answers here. So who did you go with?
I think you could realistically have 3 here. I would go no more than 3.
Okay.
And this is tough. I can make a really good argument for all 3 of these teams. Yeah. But I'm going to go with the team that I was riding hard last year, the Dallas Mavericks.
Okay.
I'm going now. Look, Dallas in the Luka era has not really ever put up a very impressive win total in the regular season.
Yeah.
They haven't done it. And they didn't do it last year. They got hot late and they won 50 to get to 50, man. And that put them as a 5 seed. It's time now for them to take a different approach in a regular season, to understand the importance of getting out of the gate quicker, not having any extended lulls where they don't play well, and taking this thing and trying to get into that top 2, top 3 in the Western Conference to give yourself a more realistic and better chance. They got all the way to the finals anyway without having home court in any round. That's pretty impressive. So this is a team now that I look at and say, hey, you added Klay Thompson. I think that's a very important piece and it fit. I do need to see how they utilize him and how easy it is for teams to guard him. But I also love the addition of Najee Marshall. So this is a team that I like more than I did last year, and they went to the NBA Finals. And I also think, look, we're going to find out a lot about Luka Doncic this year at the start of the year. And the things that he was called out for at the end of the season, how much did he take that to heart? What does he look like at the beginning of the year? What's his body look like? What's his conditioning look like? What's his approach look like? His maturity, all of those things. If it looks like same Luka, same old, whining and complaining all the time with the officials and, not really in tip-top shape and not giving you anything defensively in the regular season for most of the regular season, then I'll feel differently probably at some point mid-season next year. But going into it, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that he's going to learn from what happened last year and take that to heart and really push himself this year. And I think this is a good shot coming up this year for Luka to get his first MVP.
He's playing with Team Slovenia right now as they attempt to qualify for the Olympics. I don't know if they're going to make it. They just got blown out by Croatia in the qualifier. They still have a chance to qualify, but early returns don't look good. But if they do make the Olympics, not only would they have the Olympics like we just talked about with Team Canada and some of these other teams, he'd have to do a qualifying tournament. So you go from the finals to a qualifying tournament to the Olympics. That would be the most basketball anybody can play. And with him, he's not the spring chicken. He is a guy that could use his rest. So that could end up being a factor, although a little worried they're not going to qualify at all. Number 3, I'm going to give my list later so we don't spoil it, but who do you have number 3?
I got to put Minnesota there.
Okay.
I think a year, having gone through what they did last year. And I think that now they coming into this season, I don't know that going into last year, they necessarily even carried themselves as a championship contender. I think you'd have to look at them this year based on how their year went. And the fact that Anthony Edwards, where he took his game last year and what you think you can expect of him now going forward. I think Minnesota's that, and look, they might end up being the number 2. They might end up being the number 1 seed. I'm not going to be shocked by that out of what Minnesota's bringing to the table with that star player clearly just beginning his ascension, what that could look like. And then I also love the trade they made to get Dillingham. I think Dillingham immediately plays for them. I think he immediately gets minutes and he's going to score at the NBA level right away. That's a nice addition for their depth and somebody that can spell Conley. So they got better. And I think just mentally they're going to be better. And Anthony Edwards is the key to all that. So they could be a 1 seed, 2 seed. I don't think they'll be any lower than 3.
Is there any chance they have a little bit of, like, some teams get there? Like, this was a big getting over the hump year for them, getting to the conference finals. Is there any chance that they have the letdown where it's like, okay, we think we're there, but actually you didn't learn the lessons that you thought?
No, I don't think so, because they still got it. They still got it handed to them by Dallas. At the end of the day,
okay, they got humbled enough. Yeah,
as good as that felt to sweep Phoenix, and as good as that felt for Anthony Edwards playing against his idol and knocking him out and Kevin Durant, and as good as that felt to win that series with Denver and making that comeback in Game 7, bottom line is they watched the finals on TV like everybody else, and that's going to keep them hungry. And I think we've said it. You and I have said this about Anthony Edwards from almost day one. And when you and I got together last November, started talking about Anthony Edwards' career, we both see the look in a guy's eyes that wants to be great. So his hunger alone, I think, is not going to allow that complacency to set in and be happy with the year they had a year ago and how to have the right approach coming in. I think they're going to be very hungry.
And I think Team USA will be good for Anthony Edwards because he's with more established guys, but I think he has an opportunity to maybe put his fingerprints on that team in a way that elevates his own, like, hey, I'm better than a lot of these guys that are my contemporaries. So that'll be an interesting storyline to watch with him. So number 4, I'm hoping you have Denver.
It's your guys, man. Come on.
I was going to feel real bad if you didn't have Denver anywhere in the top 4.
It's your guys, because if it's not your guys, that's just go by process of elimination.
Are you going to go? That's part of it.
Are you going to go with the Clippers? No. Phoenix? Yeah. No. I guess maybe some people might think that, but no. How could you? The Pelicans? Nope. Kings? Okay. Yeah. Warriors? Lakers? It's process of elimination. I'm curious, real quick, if you can fill us in on what's the vibe with the Denver fan base right now?
Oh, it's really negative. I mean, the fan base viewed KCP as an integral part of the team, and that losing him, I think the fan base worries that, is it cheapness? Is it belief in the guys below? But there's an uncomfortability because you kind of knew what you were getting from Denver for the last several years. This is the first year where it's like, okay, well, who starts? What's the rotation? Who's behind? It's a little uncomfortable. And then I don't know, there's a rumor out there that Russell Westbrook is on the radar. So that would be another thing that is both exciting but also uncomfortable because he's such a unique player. So, I think this feels like a year that's less certain than previous years in terms of what will it all look like.
Yeah, look, losing KCP is you can't overstate it. I talked about this yesterday, like just as a role player, and he is, and it's not an insult, man. He's the ultimate guy for that role and way he guards and shot it, and just he's a winner, and he's been part of 2 championship teams, and he's gonna go to Orlando and be a significant, impactful player for them, a young team emerging. Can't wait to watch what he does for that team. That's a big loss. So I can understand maybe why people feel like, hey, what are we doing here? Like, are we still moving forward? Like, for me, I said this last year about them. It didn't feel like that was a 1 championship team, like that group, right? And now KCP's not there, so it's a little bit different, but Jokic is still there. Jamal Murray's still there. Michael Porter Jr. is still there. Aaron Gordon's still there. Like, that core is still there. And it didn't feel like, with a guy that's got 3 MVPs in 4 years, that's a 1 championship group. So I'm very curious to see what happens. And I'm also curious to see I think Christian Braun is going to be the guy that steps into that spot. And I'm curious to see what that looks like rather than just these splashy 15 minutes he would get where he'd energize everybody. What's it look like if Christian Braun has to play 30 minutes a night?
I think he's good. I actually think defensively, Denver won't lose much. Offensively, the shooting, I think they'll lose something there. And more importantly, the depth. It's now you elevate guys that are a lot more unproven in the second unit. But, the thing I always think is Denver's second unit got crushed last year. They got murdered every time they stepped on the court. Could it actually be worse? And one thing I think of with Denver, I'll just go ahead and say it. They were my number 2 team. And I'm kind of zigging on what people think here. In 2022, Denver's roster featured Facundo Campazzo starting, Will Barton starting, Austin Rivers in the playoffs starting, and that team was a 6 seed. I look at that and I go, Denver's not in that situation. They still have Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter. I just have a hard time believing that they fall too far. So I'm keeping them. I think that it might surprise some people. And to be honest, I'm talking myself into the idea of Westbrook. For me, number 3, I went with Dallas. Number 4 with Minnesota. You went over all of them. I think that's right. I actually think the Clippers, of all the teams below, are the team that could hop into the top, the next spot into the top 4. But I say that every year and they never do. So,
well,
what do you know?
I think we had the same 4 teams, right? You just leapfrogged a couple of teams with Denver because you've got a Denver Nuggets nightlight. I mean, let's just
what do we say right here? This is rose-colored glasses, right? I got the rose-colored glasses on. I'm reminding you in April when the Nuggets are the 2 seed.
Hey, man, look, they're in the mix, man. They're in the mix. Bottom line,
it's the same with Milwaukee. Jokic, Giannis, players of that caliber, I just have a hard time believing that they can't make other guys work. And that's why. Real quick, wild card team. For me, it was Memphis. Memphis is a team that we all think they're out of mind because of the year they had. But you know what? They've been a phenomenal regular season team in the prior 2 years. So they're a team that now they get their guy back. They might be a team that surprises some people and gets in the mix here.
Mine is going to be, for a lot of reasons we just said about some other guys, the Golden State Warriors.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's perfect.
Take a look. Let's just watch, man. Let's just watch and see. Like we talked earlier about what has to happen. I don't think it's anything nuts. I think 2 guys they currently have, Wiggins has to revert to at least his regular season form at his best. Kuminga, another step forward. Can he take this thing now to 20, 21 a game? I think he's as the second best offensive player from day one. I think he's got a chance to do that. And then, the pieces they brought in replacing some of what Klay gave you. So let's just keep an eye on Golden State. I don't think it's going to be they were 46-36 last year. I don't think they're a 500 team now. So let's see. Is Golden State good enough, particularly out of the gate? That's one of those teams that,
you're right.
Schedule's not released yet, but let's take a look. If Golden State starts off the year 6-9, no. Okay, it's going to be a wrap. Right. If they start off the year, get out of the gate, whatever, they're 10-5. Hey, man, I think everybody's going to keep that thing alive, and so they're intriguing to me, man. As long as Steph Curry puts on a uniform, I'm sorry, man. I'm going to watch. I'm going to be interested.
New Orleans and Houston are other teams that I could have talked myself into. Houston is, maybe they're a team to me that makes sense with Lauri Markkanen as well. Houston is getting to the point where they have too many good young players. They're going to have to pick, and you could consolidate a handful of those guys, Jabari Smith and Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore maybe, and consolidate that into Lauri Markkanen, who's still young enough. It's not like he's so old that he doesn't fit the timeline. You could speed things up, and if they did something like that, I think I would start to buy him a little bit more. So they're a team I could see there. Even Şengün out, Utah might like that. Hey, we're going to tank. We'll take in a guy that will be good next season and get him into our system. All right, we got a couple super chats to get out of here. Emma, what do we got? What are the people saying today? Psycho Blue says, B-Ball Cthulhu just wants to let it be known that Space Jam 2 is rapidly becoming more like a documentary instead of a work of fiction after Rich Paul's antics. Happy Independence Day. I'm going to be honest with you, Legs. Never saw Space Jam 2. Don't get the reference.
No, I never saw. I don't know that I ever saw Space Jam 1, like start to finish. I've used the reference. I've used the reference from time to time when a team inexplicably is horrible on a given night that they've lost their basketball skills, like Space Jam. Yeah, right. I've used that, but I don't think I've ever seen that movie start to finish. I will be watching it with my little guy, who's 2.5. Yeah. He's not ready for that yet, but he was He was shooting hoops, by the way, this morning on the goal in the living room. And it was the first time, like, he was actually like doing a little jump shot, getting off the ground and shooting it and follow through. Talk about a proud dad moment, man. Watching my son shoot it in the living room this morning.
Or it's a early favorite right now for the 2048 NBA draft. So if you guys are placing your odds right there, good shooter. Psycho Blue comes back. He says, Legs, thanks for using my hostage statement joke on ESPN last week. A friend texted it to me while I was on vacation. I feel like I won a contest.
Well, the thing, it's funny because somebody else said something about this, that Bill Simmons used this, and I had some people coming at me. I got news for you. I've never watched Bill Simmons, so I don't. I'm telling you right now, I don't go watch a bunch of other people. Anything that comes out of my mouth, if I didn't think of myself, I am going to credit the person who came up with it. So when I said the Celtics should draft Bronny James and then write a note to the Lakers saying we have your son, it's going to cost you Austin Reeves. That was my original thinking. If someone else had the same joke, it's not that difficult to come up with that joke. So be it. But I promise you, I don't plagiarize. I promise.
Right. Well, except for the chat. You stole that from Psycho Blue. We know it. All right. What else? What else do we have? Jay Money. He says, does BI really equate to winning basketball? Fun player to watch, but I'm not sure he moves the needle for any buying team. I 100% agree. But the one thing I'll say, Legs, is teams get desperate, man. Everybody operates as if all possibilities are available to a team. Sometimes you're in Atlanta, a Charlotte, and you're looking at it and going, either the ride's over or we take a huge gamble on a flawed player. And sometimes it works out. Andrew Wiggins was a flawed player. He gets to Golden State, at least has 1 year that helps them win a title. So I agree with the sentiment, but you know what? Desperate times come from call for desperate measures.
Yeah. Look, I think it's time, man. I think you're right. That's an interesting team. And think about it. That could have been a team either one of us said. Also, New Orleans was a team like, hey, is that dark horse we're talking about because of Zion, and that game he had at the end of the year was like so incredible that we were kind of hanging on that. It's a shame he got hurt in that game, but it's like you think, wow, is Zion Williamson the guy that could elevate a team like that? And you add DeJounte Murray to the mix. Are they a team that can get in the mix and stay in the mix and keep everybody healthy? Remains to be seen, but I don't know that Brandon Ingram's going to be a part of that.
All right, cue that outro music. Good stuff, Legs. I'm going to tell you something. 4th of July is my favorite holiday. Middle of the summer, I go up to the lake with the family. It's always a family holiday outside in nature. So starting here in about 5 hours, I look forward to having a couple of days off. But I also look forward to coming back because I think some big things are going to happen in the upcoming days. What's your plan?
Not playing. Yes, same, man. We got family coming in, mostly on my wife's side, staying with us at the beach. We'll be at the beach every day. Weather's not supposed to be great at the Jersey Shore, though. A lot of chance of rain all weekend. So it'll be like in and out. Well, we'll make the best of it. I love the holiday too. Very patriotic guy. This holiday means a lot to me, and we're gonna do it right. And then you come out of the weekend, Adam, when we head to Vegas. Summer League next week.
We got a lot of crazy stuff going on. I can't wait for it. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. We will be back next week, so make sure you're subscribed. Hit those alerts. See you guys next week.
We all sit the mayor.